you've been in the audio engineering or music production world for any length of time, you've most likely heard of compression. In a nutshell, audio compression reduces the dynamic range of an audio signal by reducing the difference between the loudest and quietest parts. This allows the volume of the audio signal to be more consistent. It does this by reducing the volume of an audio signal by a specified amount as the signal passes over a given threshold. Here's an example. Let's take a vocal track where the singer is belting out her woes at the top of her voice in one measure and then whispering her love in the next. While dynamics are an important feature of a great singer, many do not know how to properly back off the microphone at the appropriate time. It's a skill! When combined with all the other tracks in the song, either the belting will be too loud or the whispering will be inaudible. What to do? Well, you could ride the fader throughout the entire song, automating your slick fader moves as you go, or painstakingly draw the automation in your DAW. Or you could save yourself the trouble and throw a compressor on the track. The whisper level will not change, but the level of the belting will decrease depending on the ratio you assign and the threshold you set. You can then bring up the output of the vocal track so that the whispering and the belting are more consistent. So let's take a look at a popular compressor to see what all the options are for smoothing out an audio track. There are so many to choose from, but I've decided to go with the Focusrite Scarlett compressor because it is visually simple to understand and it's also extremely dynamic. There's nothing subtle about this compressor. I use it on drums a lot because it really gives them a presence in the mix, a real whack that really makes it stand out. So, looking at the controls, we have threshold, ratio, attack, release, and makeup gain. We're going to play a song and run the vocal track through the compressor. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set the threshold so that it picks up everything.
No one can ever get to you walking straight
And the compression ratio, we're going to set it 1:1 so there's no change in the level. Now we're going to increase the ratio to max to show how the vocal changes. Next, we're going to set the threshold to the highest level so that no audio passes through. This should cause no compression to be made to the audio.
We travel, never knowing where the path is going to take us.
Now we're going to slowly dial the threshold back so you can see how the compression kicks in as we lower it.
It's amazing, no one can ever get to you walking straight lines through your labyrinth.
Now we're going to raise the makeup gain to make the whole track louder.
Is going to take us. It's amazing, no one can ever get to you walking straight lines through your labyrinth we travel.
And you'll notice that now the quiet parts and the loudest parts are much closer in volume. Another use for compressors is to decrease the volume of a track when another track plays. For example, when a vocal comes in, the volume of a guitar or a keyboard can be reduced to let the vocal be more upfront in the mix. You use a sidechain for this. Let's say you want to quickly bring down the volume of a rhythm guitar when the vocalist starts singing. To do this, you would assign the guitar to the compressor, and then you would assign the vocal track to the sidechain input of the compressor. Now, the vocal is triggering the compressor to turn on and off. The volume of the guitar is compressed whenever there is a vocal signal.
It's amazing, no one can ever get to you walking straight lines through your labyrinth we travel, never knowing where the path is going to take us, never knowing if we're getting closer to you.
A neat trick being used by EDM producers these days is to quickly compress a keyboard pad every time the kick drum hits to get a pumping sound on the keyboards. To get that effect, assign the keyboard to the compressor and then assign the kick drum track to the sidechain input. Here's a tip on sidechaining. The signal triggering the compressor does not have to be in the mix at all. For example, you can trigger the keyboard from the kick drum to get that pumping sound, but you can remove the kick drum entirely from the mix. You would then have a pumping keyboard all by itself. This brings up the attack and release controls, and these are very important. They control how quickly or gradually a compressor responds to changes in an audio signal. The faster the attack, the quicker the compressor acts on the signal. The slower the release, the longer the compressor will control the signal. Here are some examples of attack and release settings for a variety of different audio situations. Fast attack, fast release. This setting is often used to control sharp transients in audio, such as the initial impact of a snare drum or a guitar pick. A fast attack time means the compressor responds quickly to reduce the level of the loud transient. A fast release time allows the compressor to recover quickly, so the audio returns to its natural state shortly after the transient. Slow attack, fast release. This setting is used to smooth out the overall dynamic range of a sound source while still allowing some of the transients to come through. A slow attack time lets the initial transients pass through, while a fast release quickly reduces the audio level, creating a more controlled sound. Fast attack, slow release. In this configuration, the compressor responds quickly to transients and then releases gradually. It can be used to add sustain to instruments like electric guitars, making the notes sound smoother and more even in volume. A slow attack and a slow release. This combination is often used when you want a very subtle and gentle compression effect. It allows both the attack and the release phases to be gradual, preserving the natural dynamics of the audio source while reducing the overall dynamic range slightly. Okay? And then there's a medium attack and medium release, and these are often considered a general purpose setting. They provide a balance between controlling dynamics and maintaining the natural character of the audio. There's one last thing about compressors that you really need to know. You should have in the back of your head the knowledge that compressors come in different flavors. 5 to be exact. Back when compressors were all hardware, manufacturers applied different techniques and designs and used different internal components to create various styles of compression. The plugins we use today emulate those styles. The 5 primary types of audio compressors are VCA, FET, F-E-T, optical or opto, tube, and PWM. Each of these types produces its own sonic character. So here's a breakdown of each type and how it does its unique form of compression. VCA compressors. VCA stands for Voltage Controlled Amplifier. These types of compressors use a control signal to determine whether gain reduction is applied to the signal. VCAs are one of the most common types of compressors and usually contain all the parameters you find on plugins. Attack, release, threshold, ratio, knee, which determines whether you're going to have a hard compression or a softer compression. These are probably the most used compressors in the studio because of their precise control and predictable sound. Compressors that are applied to groups of tracks or on the main mix are almost always VCA. For example, 2 very popular VCA bus compressors are the SSL-G bus compressor and the API 2500 bus compressor. These add what is known as glue across the tracks to make the overall mix sound more cohesive. The next is the FET or FET compressors. FET stands for Field Effect Transistor. And as their name suggests, FET compressors rely on transistors for gain reduction. Now these compressors are incredibly fast. Attack and release times can be set to just about instantaneous. With that lightning speed, they tend to introduce a bit of pleasant distortion and color to the signal, especially when you push them aggressively. That means they're not as great as a VCA compressor for adding the glue on a mix bus, but on individual instruments, they are fantastic. As an example, check out the UA 1176 limiting amplifier. UA is Universal Audio, and they make the plug-in the UAD 1176. It's crisp and clean under normal circumstances, but you can get really gritty when you push it. In fact, one of the things the 1176 is known for is its all buttons in mode. It has buttons which control the ratio. So when you push in all 4 of the ratio buttons together at once, you get a very aggressive, almost distortion saturated sound. It's quite unique, and it adds a wonderful effect that's been used on hundreds of famous recordings. Next are the optical or opto compressors. Optical compressors use a light-dependent resistor and a light source to determine how compression and gain reduction is applied. The input signal literally turns on a light source inside the compressor that'll shine brighter or dimmer depending on the input level. The light-sensitive resistor then causes the compressor to apply gain reduction. When the light dims in response to the fading input signal, the amount of compression is reduced. Because of the way these compressors are built, they're not as fast and aggressive as a FET compressor, nor are they as clean and punchy as the VCA. But what they do provide is a smooth and musical warmth, which is perfect at the end of a vocal chain. The most famous example of an optical compressor is the Teltronics LA2A. Universal Audio also makes a UAD version of the LA2A. The only controls it has are a gain knob and a peak reduction knob. Attack and release times are not controllable because they're program dependent. Hot input signals keep the light source illuminated, so the release time will be longer. The opposite is true for weaker input signals. Next, we have tube compressors. These types of audio compressors make use of vacuum tubes to apply gain reduction. There are other compressors that also use tubes, like the LA2A, but they only use the tubes for coloration and not for actual dynamic processing. Tube compressors tend to have a slower response to transients relative to the other types of compressors, making them a good choice for instrument or mix buses. They won't suck the life out of your mix because their slower attack times keep important transients intact. And the best-known example of a hardware tube compressor is the legendary Fairchild 670, also a UAD plug-in. Finally, we have PWM compressors. PWM stands for pulse width modulation, and these compressors use high-frequency pulse signals to trigger on and off values, and thus control the average amplitude of a signal over time. It essentially splits the audio signal into discrete parts and then mutes certain sections. These pulses are incredibly fast to allow the compressor to control the level without introducing artifacts. PWM compressors are known for being transparent and have lightning-quick attack and release times. They're not as popular as other compressor types, but they are powerful and have their own unique qualities. The most iconic PWM is the legendary Pi compressor from the 1960s. You should now have a decent understanding of the different types of compressors, what they do, and how to use them. Test out as many of them as you can and tweak them as often as you can. Good compression is an art form. And with practice, you will become a great compression artist.